Hi, everybody. I'm delivering one for the team tonight. This is the CandlePower Hour, Keys to the City. Mercury is on assignment. The team is intact. We're having fun. Tonight, before I do want to say, go to electricast.com to listen to these podcasts. We have a growing presence on YouTube as well, and the all the other major streaming services is where you can listen to the CandlePower Hour. We've got some great ones that we're lining up. Today, we are diving back into the LBC and portions of greater San Pedro, California. We have with us an amazing act. They are called Razing Jane. And with us, we have Brian Coakley and Grace Parris. Welcome to the show, everybody. Hi. Thank you for coming on. How is it today? How are you all doing?
Amazing. How are you?
I'm doing okay. We'll have to speak up a little bit. My voice is obviously very loud. Welcome to the show. I'm glad you all are here. You have a lot of things going on right now, and that's why we have you on the show. We're excited. Let's just start. Where did Razing Jane come from? Where did it sprout? And where do you two come from? Let's begin with that.
Okay.
Start with us?
Yeah.
Start with us.
Yeah. Go for it.
Take it away.
Oh, okay. So, well, Grace and I actually, we came about from, what was it, 1993 or something?
Yeah.
We met each other in
ago.
93. Grace was working for
Lethal
Records at the time, and my band Rule 62 had done a single, and we're like, who's doing the artwork for the single? And it was like, oh, this crazy chick Grace is doing the artwork for the single. And so it started this friendship that we had that was like a mutually like love of music, love of the music scene, working in the music scene. Grace went from like what you were just freelancing for a couple different labels. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, Grace is running
Kung Fu. So I went from
Records.
Lethal to Fearless as their advertising director. And then I ended up as the general manager for Kung Fu Records, working for the Vandals under Nitro.
Wow.
At the same time, I was starting my hardcore punk band Exit, X-IT, all female, 3-piece band. And Brian was like on a hiatus, right, from Cadillac Tramps doing 62 at that time.
Yeah, I'd been in the Cadillac Tramps for a long time, and then we took a little break, and then I was doing Rule 62, took a side tangent, got signed to Maverick, Madonna's record label with that band, and then Grace put out vinyl with her band, but we kind of went away from each other for a while, right? And then years later, you go full circle, years later, we rekindled our friendship. We were back being friends again. And her band had played, Alex's Bar in Long Beach, the notorious venue in Long Beach, Alex's Bar. Her band played Exit. They played the very first show at Alex's Bar. They were the first band to play there. And Alex was, we were hanging out at Alex's Bar one night. Just like a two.
Yeah, and Alex had a relationship with both Brian and myself, but separately.
Yeah,
he used to book Exit all the time, where Brian didn't even. Our paths were so different when those two bands our bands were going.
Yeah,
that Alex was this like common thread between all of it, even though we never played together or anything like that.
Yeah,
so we're at
some show at Alex's Bar, hanging out. We're talking, and Alex is like, "When are you two going to start a band?" And we were just like,
and that was like what, like a couple of years ago.
Yeah. And it was like, yeah, when are we going to start a band?
Wow.
So then we just started talking about what we wanted that band, if we were going to start one, what it would be.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, we both love like so many different genres of music. And it's like, of course we have punk rock in our veins, like to the hilt, but it's like, what if we had something that had enough punk rock in the veins, but also a little bit of like
something else? Brian asked me, he said, remember, you go, what would, and I was embarrassed about this actually a little bit, because I'm thinking, here's all these punk roots. It's my roots. It's weird to branch out. But Brian said, what would you want to play if you didn't have any fear attached to it? And I said, kind of into like dark wave right now. You know, I'm into like something with a little bit of an electronic beat and some dark wave, and like I want to keep the punk roots, but like where do we go from there?
Yeah.
He's like, I'm totally into that. And so
we both wanted it to be something that had groove, power, like an edge, like even verging on a little bit of metal, but danceable and a little scary. Like where it's like all that shit.
Everything we are.
Lot, you know?
Right. Well, now you two have been to a partnership since 1993 as far as friends, community, and bouncing off each other, you know, your opinions and working together. And all of a sudden now, 4 or 5 years ago, you finally put a band together?
2. No, actually,
2 years ago.
We started writing for Razing Jane a year and a half ago.
That's amazing.
We decided we needed to do a project together. I think it was about 2 years ago, we decided we needed to do the project. We didn't start writing the music for Razing Jane until June. So about a year and a half ago.
And how long ago did Alex recommend that you two put a band together?
It was like 2 years ago.
I think it was like February of 2023.
After all this time.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the 90s, because man, what a world it was back then compared to today. So we'll talk about punk rock and where you were in the record industry, and as musicians. What was punk rock like back then compared to today?
I trip out today because there's so many different types of music that are called punk rock now.
Yeah.
And it's hard to parse that a little bit, because it's, you know, what was punk in my day, like at least not just listening to, I mean, I was listening to punk before I started playing it, but what was punk for me as far as being a musician was like a hardcore, every song needed to create a slam pit kind of punk. That was
rebellious.
Very. I mean, in fact, we were, especially being in the, you know, independent record label business that I was in, and seeing so many bands going different directions, I was like hell bent on just putting out vinyl and staying kind of under the radar and keeping that hardcore rebellious thing going. So that was kind of where I was coming from. Brian was sort of in a different place at that point in the 90s.
Yeah, because the thing was like Cadillac Tramps formed in 87, and the punk scene was flailing around by then. The punk scene was kind of hurting by 87. It was like Suicidal Tendencies and all that had been banned from LA, and there was so much violence and so much gang warfare and all kinds of crazy stuff. And then hair metal was kind of ramping up in like the Hollywood scene and stuff. So we were forming, and we were just stuck out like sore thumbs. And we were like punk rock with blues in it, you know. There was this weird kind of music that nobody else was playing really, but there was so many different kinds of bands then. And in a way, like right now, weirdly enough, right now, there are a lot of bands that I don't necessarily recognize as like what would be the cookie cutter hardcore punk, but they're still under the punk umbrella, you know. Like right now, strangely enough, they're springing up all these different, like that, what's that, Amyl and the Sniffers, and like all these other crazy bands that are like, they're all called punk rock, but it's like they're very different from each other. And I think it's kind of a turn back to like the earlier days of punk rock, when it would be like, you know, the Talking Heads were called punk rock, and the B-52s were called punk rock, and it was like, what the hell is all this crazy? But then Black Flag and the Circle Jerks and the Dead Kennedys and like the old school stuff.
It's so funny that we're talking about this right now, because we played, I think it was like our fourth show, Razing Jane, and it was at the Garden Amphitheater in Garden Grove, and it was with Cadillac Tramps, Throw Rag, Deadbolt. We were right before Deadbolt, and we go on, and it's a really amazing show. That's such a great venue, and you know, we're playing, and these people had moved to the front, and I could hear them talking kind of while we were playing in between, going, "This is so punk," and this is Razing Jane, and I'm going, "This is punk."
And we're like, this is not as punk.
Wow.
confused by that statement because to me, it's so different than the punk I always played.
Yeah. It's not like the punk that you recall back in the day.
Yeah, but I guess you can't take
of
the punk out of the punker, right?
Yeah, you can't take
Right.
it. Punk is in us, like, yeah.
Now, Brian, when you were a part of Maverick Records and the Cadillac Tramps and all, what was that like working with Maverick? And I know that the music industry has changed so much. Both of you come from the record industry. What do you think about how the record business has changed?
Oh God, I mean, it's changed. It's crazy because when I was on Maverick, it was like the tail end of like getting a major label record deal as a viable option as a musician. Like you come up and you're like, okay, we're going to put a band together. We're going to get a manager. We're going to get on the road, do some shows, and then we're going to try to get signed. You know, that whole try to get signed to a record label used to be a viable option. And I don't just really think like people nowadays, I don't know what the hell they're doing out there because it just doesn't seem like selling music is even a viable business.
I think that what kind of happened along the way in our world is the competition sort of fizzled away. Mm-hmm. And when I mean competition, I mean in, as far as the songwriting, competing for that record deal, with product, with something that's viable. Even in the punk rock, it's not for commercial success, but, without some good competition,
yeah,
it's hard to find some product that can beat the others, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And I know like, I feel bad because I think like the live music scene on the small level, like the clubs, it used to be a lot more happening and now it's fizzled out a little bit. There's just not as much.
Well, a lot of it's getting replaced by tribute bands and cover bands, which is, if you look at a lot of the more happening venues right now and you look at what shows they're having, a lot of them are tribute bands and cover bands. And that's kind of pushing out original songwriters like us.
The original.
Right.
I mean, it's like not making as much room for those venues to accommodate bands with originals because that's what the public is looking for. That's what sells out these venues is familiarity.
Yeah.
What do you feel about the generation gap in rock and roll and punk?
One of the things I kind of noticed so one of the things I did last summer, a band DOS Clown I was playing with for a bit just to help them out. And we went and did a tour of Europe and we played the Rebellion Festival, which is like, the biggest punk rock thing in Europe, the biggest punk rock festival. And there were so many old people there. I was tripping out. It was like, my friend goes, it's going to be a trip because you're going to see blue mohawks with walkers, and
yeah.
And I swear to God, there were so many old punkers there. But I was like, one of the things that's tripping me out about all the old legacy punk bands are still playing shows and people are still coming out. And punk rock has less ageism, I think, than a lot of other, like even any business, like movie acting or whatever. When you become the old actor, your roles diminish, you have less options and stuff. But if you're like,
unless you're on your 5th farewell tour,
but if you're like exploited, or like one of those if you're like one of those bands, like the old band, they're still packing shows. It's crazy. Like, I don't even understand it, but they
are
care so much about the age thing, especially for the older legacy bands.
And it's because, like we were talking about, like some of that, it's hard. You don't see that anymore. You don't see what used to exist as much. So I think that's why the legacy bands are doing so well with reunion type shows or reboots or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Well, it's good that the younger generations have the opportunity to see these bands before we fizzle away too brutally. So, well, I want to say that y'all come with a very strong pedigree within the band. You have members from Agent Orange, Social Distortion. I want to mention the Vigilantics, DOS Clown. So this is very impressive of what y'all got going, and you guys are now writing and recording, and you have some singles that you have released. including one that is called Twisted, that
Twisted.
I really enjoy.
Oh, thank you. Twisted's
what
our
is
one and only right now.
I'm sorry?
Twisted's the only single we've released so far. Pieces is going to come right behind it.
You have a second single called Pieces. I want to ask you something. What is dark wave?
So it's crazy. Dark wave is kind of like it's a big mashup of everything from like Marilyn Manson to Smashing Pumpkins to some of the more dark Depeche Mode stuff, The Cure, Susie and the Banshees. It goes
all right.
Basically as a culmination of all of the darker.
I think like even Queens of the Stone Age fall into that.
Even Queens of the Stone Age can fall into that genre, and it's a pretty broad genre, which is it's awesome because you can kind of genre bend within it, you know, because like a band like Bauhaus is considered dark wave
now where it was like
it used to be what, death rock, or I don't even know what they used to call
gothic.
Goth
Gothic.
Yeah.
So it kind of
so
combines goth and the darker elements of like new wave music, post-punk music.
Yeah.
So Joy Division would even be in there too. You know,
now
right.
Joy Division will be considered dark.
Well,
Yeah.
you have you do have a sense of some goth in you, in your performance, in your look, in the music.
That's just by accident. We were born with that.
I think it's a part of y'all. So I think it's really, really cool. You have a really good chemistry, and together, who writes the music? How do you guys formulate, and who's the main creative elements, or do you collaborate?
It's definitely a collaboration.
Yeah.
It's funny because I'll write something, he'll write something, and then, you know, I'll solo sing one, he'll solo sing one, but we do a lot of stuff together. Which Pieces is going to be a duet versus Twisted, which is mostly me. And we kind of have this like thing where you just did one, I'll do one, you do one. So, I mean, right now, Brian's winning, but
yeah, I'm winning. It's a competition. I'm winning.
Got 4 new songs. So like when he comes up with a couple new ones, I'm like, oh, I have to hurry up and come up with something. But I would say like it was a real challenge in the very beginning. When we were trying to come up with what our sound was going to be, because when in the band Exit, I did all the writing and I did the lead vocals.
Cadillac Tramps, I did like 99% of the writing. So we were both the principal songwriters in our bands.
So when we started Razing Jane, we're like, okay, we have to start writing some stuff. And I'm like, he's like, what do you have? And I'm like, I have something, you know, which was Pieces. That was the first song that I think we completed as Razing Jane.
Yeah.
And so we started figuring out, you know, I played Pieces for him and started working through it. And we just kept perfecting it because that was the song that was actually really difficult for me to write because it's not in my usual hardcore punk style. And I spent a lot of time like revamping it and going over it and trying to figure it out. And ended up right now, I think it's the slowest tempo.
It's like the slowest, most mellow.
It doesn't mean it's like not hard. It's still a little bit hard and has that edge to it, but it's just a little bit different. And that was a song we kind of experimented with to find our sound. And Brian had come up with something kind of at the same time, which we ended up backburning, which is one of our better new songs we have now. So I think it's going to be interesting to put it all together on this album, but it's definitely a collaboration.
Yeah.
I mean, most of our songs, like one or the other of us has chimed into even something that like Brian writes a song, he has music, he has a melody to it. I'll write the lyrics. Like we just kind of like wherever we need, we jump in together. So we work really, really well together, which is not always common with primary like songwriters, right? Like we're used to writing all the songs for our band.
Yeah.
So
not to get too lofty about it, but an example would be we're kind of like Keith Richards, Mick Jagger, or Lennon McCartney. We're kind of like where we both have a hand on each other's stuff. Even a song I wrote almost every single thing, there's a huge influence in a couple of parts that made the whole song different that Grace put in. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, or vice versa. Like Twisted,
Right.
Twisted was basically a Grace tune all the way, but then there's like there's elements of how we do the chorus and
the weird like guitar sounds that are in there and stuff that Brian came up with. It took that song to the next level. So it's like, it's hard to.
We're having fun. We're definitely having fun. And our producer, Derek O'Brien, our drummer, who was the original drummer of Social Distortion, he's a producer. And we played our first show, and he was at the show. He wasn't our drummer then. And he came up and he's like, I totally get what you guys are doing. I want to record you guys. I totally see the vision of what you are. And I want to go in. I'm not even going to charge you. We're going to take as much time as we have to figure out what your sound is, because I can tell what you guys are trying to do. And then a bunch of events happen, and he ends up our drummer. And it's like, now we're starting to write. And it's like, we have the two principal writers in there, and he's like he's like this producer in the room now. And the new stuff is really exciting us a lot. It's like crazy how cool the new
every song we're working on right now that's new, instead of having that pre-production before we go into the recording studio, we're just learning them and developing them that way. So we have our producer in the room while we're doing our new stuff. That's why we're so excited about doing our full length.
Yeah.
Because it's coming.
Whose idea was it to begin with the duets as far as vocals go?
I think it's actually started because, I think one of the main things is we both play and sing. And to me, like, I didn't really want to give up one or the other, and he didn't really want to give up one or the other, but we also loved the idea of having two front people, because then it's even more energy, and I like to think that we're both pretty fun performers. So having that element is kind of unique, and there's just not a lot of bands that do it like we do it.
No.
We do get compared every once in a while to X, but people will caveat that with, but it's so different.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
so
the awesome other element to it is both of us like to sometimes not have to sing. Because, when you're a guitar player or a bass player or whatever, you want to rock out sometimes and not have to always be back on that microphone. It's a discipline to have to be like, I'm singing the chorus. I got 2 seconds to do a little fill on my guitar. And now I got to get back up there and sing the verse. Mm-hmm. And so we both we're enjoying having a couple of times where it's like, Grace sings all the lead on this one, and I'm just a guitar player, or vice versa.
And then I get to dance because I like to dance.
Yeah.
So then I get to dance a little bit while I'm playing. It's hard to do that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure there's people in the crowd will be like, "Oh, the dude's singing now."
Oh.
Sit down.
It's time to go to the bar.
You know what? We do a Bloodstains Agent Orange cover at the end of our set, which we've added in. We don't. Covers really aren't what we're focused on, but I really want to do that one. I love that song, and I get to put my bass down for that one. I get into the crowd.
Yeah.
And that one's really fun to do.
Nice. So. Well, Grace, let me ask you, as a bass player singer, what are some of your inspirations and your influences?
That's interesting. That's an interesting question, because vocally, my influences are first of all, my father was in a band. My dad was in a band. He played guitar. I wanted to learn guitar because my dad played guitar. He wouldn't teach me guitar. He made me take accordion lessons, and I ended up playing bass. But through that, I learned to play and sing. And one thing that he constantly did to me was feed me music. I remember being like 9 or 10, getting my first ghetto blaster, single cassette player. And with that came a Simple Minds cassette and a Rush cassette. And then within, of 6 months of that, I had a Metallica cassette, so I was being influenced by all these different types of music very, very young. I would say that my core is Joan Jett, The Runaways and Joan Jett, Pat Benatar. Patsy Cline is in that mix. So it's it came more from I was looking at it from a performer place versus a singer or a bass player, and then just that female influence. But I also, it's interesting because a lot of my other bands that influenced me were kind of even more. There was punk bands, there was metal bands. Soundgarden's one of them. It's when Razing Jane got a radio station on Pandora, and Twisted was put on there, and they created the station, curated the station. There's everything from like
But
Black
Surfers.
Sabbath, Butthole for Surfers,
Queens of the
Soundgarden, Queens of the Stone Age, what, 9 Inch Nails. And it's like, I'm like, wait, are they like listening to me talk? You know, but it comes out in the music. So I would say my influences are very across the board. And then in high school, I did, you know, musicals and stuff. So
Right. Well, the thing that we talked about earlier is the friendly competition in music, and both of you seem to have the friendly competition amongst yourselves to get those songs out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
And that's maybe why your songs have that flair and that spark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it could be for sure.
Now, you're 2 years into Razing Jane. You're promoting. How are you all promoting these days in social media compared to back in the day? We talked earlier about the 90s. How are you taking social media? And I think you might have recently gone to the NAMM show this year. You know, what's promoting like these days?
So different. It's so different, especially coming from the record industry where I was the person doing the promoting for not just my band, but other bands. I mean, we talk about this all the time. Like, so my business that I'm in, real estate, I do a ton of social media. I had to jump on that bandwagon very early on. So social media is something that I'm used to doing, having to do. But one thing I really, really miss that I just don't see a ton of, and it's the way we promoted our bands back in the day, was fanzines. You know, my band Exit, we didn't tour anywhere outside of the US, yet we had tons of fans in Germany and Argentina and Spain and random places because of those fanzines. I think social media, it's helpful, but it also dilutes things because everybody's on it, you know? And so,
yeah,
I mean, you have to constantly be feeding it out there, and then they decide to put it out there however they want it to, you know? So
It's about the algorithms and the likes compared to the actual depth of the music fan,
right,
buying that magazine and that rag and reading, opening it up. Yeah. So I see what you're saying.
But you also have, on the other side of that, you have a chance where anybody who does follow you and want to be like involved as a fan, you have the opportunity to give them content like all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, you know, I'll have stuff where it's like, you know, what does this lyric mean, or what does that lyric mean? You can just get on Facebook and go, this is exactly what I was trying to say. And you don't have to wait for somebody to make a documentary about your band 20 years later. And I'm noticing, like, right now, some kids that I kind of mentor, some people in bands, right? And they'll put out a song and they'll be like, oh yeah, you know, that didn't really work out because, you know, it's like nobody bought it. I'm like, you only posted it and promoted it like 1 or 2 times or something. It's like, you don't get how it works, man.
It's an instant
freaking hammer that shit.
It's an instant gratification generation for sure. Like, where you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, our first post, so we didn't even have our name Razing Jane until mid-February last year. Like, we didn't really become a band all the way until mid-February last year. So it's been a little over a year. Our very first post was on Valentine's Day last year. So, you know,
nice.
Just pick up those likes and those followers and all that kind of stuff. Like, I was like hitting it pretty hard out the gate with just, we didn't have anything to put out there other than practice videos, like at a rehearsal studio.
Yeah, we had no tunes recorded.
Yeah.
We were posting little bits. I'm like, that sounds terrible.
Brian was like so reluctant to post any of our rehearsals, but I'm like, no one knows who we are. We don't have anything to post. We have to put something out there so we can get this going.
Yeah.
You know, and it really worked really well. So
yeah.
now we have Twisted has an actual video,
right,
not a practice video, and we have some pretty good live performances, but you know, it's like you constantly have to feed that social media machine.
Yeah. And that's my thing too, is I want to make videos for every song, but we never have. It's like time constraints and people's schedules, and all of us are busy people. So it's like, I really want to put out a real video for every single song, whether that's realistic or not, but I'm going to get as many as I can in there. Cause definitely.
Well, the good thing is it's realistic today, but there's also costs involved as how big you want to go. You know, people can do videos, but when you want to jump into the production effort and you got to start spending all this money and get budgets for your visions, that's where the costs and the time constraints, the post-production. So I get it, you know, but I think it's very important because today's world is a visual world. You know, the music industry is on television.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks don't get it. So that's where it's all changed too. So the more that you can make yourselves a visual representation, I think the better you are in this day and age. You know, sort of like with TikTok.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are your plans now? As Razing Jane, you know, what are your plans for the near future? You say that you have a single coming out that you're about ready to release. What are you all up to right now?
We're writing like crazy right now. Like, especially Brian, he's like unstoppable right now. He becomes this
awesome
like writing machine. So, but we're fleshing out, like we're pretty close to finishing completely 3 songs, and we have a few more in the works, but we already have a full set. So we're ready to do an album.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be our next big step. You know, we released Twisted single. That was our debut in December. And we wanted to do one right behind that. And we decided to kind of restructure what we were doing, get Derek playing drums on our full length, you know, and take some of the stuff we had done previously and back burner it for a second so that we can put it all back out there with this evolved sound that we have now as it is evolving, right? It just keeps getting better and better. And so I think that's what we're most excited about right now is putting that full length out, including these new songs and then getting big shows under our belt.
And we're trying to be a little bit philosophical about stuff because we kind of have had a couple of, I wouldn't call them blocks, but there's like momentum blocks. Like we were recorded with our first drummer. We ended up parting ways with him. We had to add Derek in. So then Derek has to learn the set. And we're like, you know, we're trying to get this momentum going, shows, go for some festivals, get some stuff going. And things have had these blocks. In the meantime, we pop out a few new tunes and they're like, holy shit, this is the sound we were looking for right here. Like, so it's almost like when you know, if you try to turn everything into a positive. So I guess it's like a positive thing that we were kind of pulled back a little bit because it really let us develop a sound.
Yeah.
And it's like the sound we were really looking for. Like we were kind of like, oh, this is pretty close. We're getting there. And then we're like, oh shit, this new stuff, that's the thing, you know? So it's kind of exciting.
You're settling in as a band, you know, you're making you're dotting the I's and crossing the T's and getting ready for the album. You have an in-house producer. So I think that you're just basically, you're settling in. And I think that's great. You know, get all the elements, get the chemistry in line. And I think that you guys have something that's really, really viable and marketable. I really, really enjoy Razing Jane. So I do want to ask you, what kind of advice do you have for younger acts, for people who want to break into the art, into the music? Do you have advice for these kids in this generation?
Do it for the love. Do it for the love because it's going to break your freaking heart.
I mean, do it for fun.
Soul-sucking.
Do it for fun. I have so much fun doing it. I feel like for me, when I'm not playing, and there was a big gap from one band to another for me, where I got back into it and all of a sudden this piece of my soul came back into my body, you know, and it's just a part of me that has to exist. And so don't give up on that. I mean, the break I took was because of like band heartbreak, kind of, you know, something ended and then it was like, oh no. So just don't give up. Don't give up on that part of you because of, you know what? Here's a good one. We all have this imposter syndrome thing going on, you know, a lot of us do because we're self-taught, we play by ear kind of thing. And there's always this fear in you that you're not good enough to go play with someone else or play. Hey, it's in your heart. Like, don't worry about what other people think, say, do. Keep playing, keep evolving your craft. There's no such thing as actually mastering something. We're always on a quest to master that. So, you know, it's progress, and play for the love and the fun.
Yep.
I love it. You're inspiring me too. You know, it's really hard to regain creativity if you lose it. So it's good to keep the fire and the spark alive.
Yeah.
Brian and Grace, Razing Jane, it's been a pleasure to have you on this podcast and to have a chat with you. We do wish you the very best in your efforts and your career and your launch. We do have a bit of a compilation record coming out. CandlePower does. So we're very excited to announce that Razing Jane will be a part of it. So I guess we can start announcing it. It's been awesome having you on.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome.
Let's continue this conversation later on down the road. And so we're going to sign off. Thank you very much for coming on to this podcast, Brian and Grace. It's been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Diego. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. It's been great.
We will see you soon.
We'll put the shit out of it.
Absolutely. We are the CandlePower Hour on electricast.com, all major streaming services. Stay tuned for more. Find us on YouTube, and you will see us live very soon, too. Signing off. Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Sit, Lulu, sit.
Powered by
Electricast.